It's been 100 days since I set up this low-tech nature aquarium that's right behind me. A lot has changed since I first set it up. Before I show you how it's doing today on day 100, I'm going to take you back to the beginning and give you a quick recap of how I set it up. After 30 days, I ran into a problem that led to some major changes, which I'll tell you all about. I'm also going to share some crazy stories of things that happened along the way, and I'll give you an update on all of the fish and the plants. I'm Lucas, and welcome to Terracotta Aquarium. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you want to see more awesome aquariums, make sure that you're subscribed. Okay, without further ado, let's travel back in time 100 days. I started this build like any other, first getting all of the equipment set up and a white background fitted to the tank. This aquarium is 25 gallons, and if you want more information on the equipment, there are links to all of it down in the description. I set up the substrate by starting with a layer of recycled media to create some height, and then layering on some aqua soil, adding a few root tabs, and then covering everything with about an inch thick layer of sand. Then I created a hardscape using spiderwood and dragonstone. I used some spiderwood twigs to create the illusion of roots. I took a while to glue everything together, then added a ton of scatter gravel. After this, I added a bunch of Java moss all over the hardscape and a couple of rocks that I placed in the foreground. Then I started planting and covered the hardscape in a ton of epiphytes. I used a mix of Java ferns, Anubias barteri, and Anubias nanopetite. I left a big open space in the background that I proceeded to fill with stems. I used a large tiger lotus, which I would end up moving around a little bit, and filled in the rest of the space with Bacopa, Ludwigia, and Crypt balanci. I added a couple of snails and let the aquarium settle in for 30 days. After 30 days, the aquarium was looking pretty good. I added 17 Cardinal Tetras and a pair of honey Gouramis. All of the plants were growing in really well. The stem plants were starting to fill out the space nicely, the Java fern had lots of new growth, and the Anubias were chugging along. There was one problem, however, that was looming in the future. Here we are on day 100, and as you can see, the aquarium is looking a little bit more sparse than it was at 30 days. And that's because of the major problem that I had with this aquarium. And that problem was mainly the Java moss and the way that I adhered it. What I did is I used super glue and I just kind of put glue on the spiderwood and then adhered the moss that way. And because of that, a lot of it didn't get like a really good hold on the wood. And that led to a lot of algae growing on the Java moss. So most of the moss turned into just a bit of an algae bomb, and I was getting just a ton of hair algae just all over the hardscape. So a week ago, I did a major maintenance session to prepare for like the 100 days look kind of thing. I removed all of that moss. I did a whole bunch of trimming and replanting. So it is looking a little bit sparse, but that's okay. This is all just part of the life cycle of an aquarium, honestly. I also removed a ton of the floating plants, and there was a bunch of duckweed growing. And what I did is I just hooked up a surface skimmer on the side, and the surface skimmer just sucked up all of the duckweed, and I periodically would just empty it and put it back. And yeah, that's a great little way to get rid of a ton of duckweed, kind of in an automated way, in a bit of a hands-off way. But in that maintenance session, I did a bunch of trimming and replanting of all of the Bacopa and the Ludwigia in the backgrounds. And I also removed a few bigger leaves from the tiger lotus. You can't really see it right now. So the whole aquarium is looking very green, which is why I added some red root floaters to the top to try to bring back a bit of that red color and make the whole thing a little bit more interesting. But I think between all of the floating plants that were in here and all of the algae and all of the moss, a lot of nutrients that were in the water column were getting totally sucked up, not to mention all of the Java fern and everything here. All of this epiphytic growth is just purifying the water column. And as I said, along with the moss and the algae. And I think that was causing all of the stems to suffer a little bit because they were relying just entirely on the nutrient layer for their nutrients. And I can tell that because there was quite a bit of rooty growth coming out of the sides of the Ludwigia, so they were reaching for those nutrients in the water column as much as they could. And you can still see that in some places. But what I did yesterday actually is I ran out and grabbed some root tabs, added a whole bunch to the back of the aquarium in places where the growth is a little bit denser. And so I think now I've kind of set up the aquarium for success in the next 100 days. So as I've said, this is kind of just part of the life cycle of the aquarium. It's going to go through phases like this. It is, even though it's 100 days old, it's still going to be finding its balance and that kind of thing, especially in a low-tech aquarium like this. Just all of the processes of balancing are going to happen a lot more slowly than in like a high-tech tank, just because the growth is slower. So yeah, the growth of the stems really did slow down. So I did some trimming and replanting. I think that now they are totally set up for success. But all of the Java ferns in the Anubias have been doing really, really well. You can see all of this kind of new growth on the Java ferns is a much brighter green than the older growth, which is getting these sort of black spots on it. And I attribute that a lot to the fertilizer that I've been using. So I've been using this UNS plant food min, which I think I've mentioned this a couple of times in other videos, but I have found that this fertilizer works really, really well to get Java ferns to grow and keep their kind of vibrant color. I know this is not the best example, but the reason that I can tell is because you can see such a contrast between the old growth and some of the newer leaves. And it's actually gotten the Java fern to like grow new leaves like pretty quickly. A lot of the time when I have Java fern, it just kind of makes the babies on the ends of the leaves. But since adding this fertilizer, I've had new growth that is coming like straight off of the main rhizome, which is really exciting. So I've just been adding like 3 pumps of this whenever I do a water change or once a week, basically. So I'll add a few pumps now. And yeah, I'm really happy with this fertilizer, and it's really just been rejuvenating all of these Java ferns. But I think the Anubias is also really loving it too. There's new growth in a couple of places on the Anubias barteri that I've been able to see. And this one here in the front has especially been thriving since setting this up. It's got a good amount of light right here, and you can see that the roots are going all the way down into the substrate. And I'm sure that's true of the other one here and probably the one in the front, but they have a little bit less light than that one does. So the epiphytes overall are doing a lot better than the stems. But as I said, I think now the stem growth is probably going to explode. I've given them a lot more light and refreshed the nutrients in the substrate. So it'll be interesting to see how they do, over the next few weeks as this aquarium grows back to kind of what it was before. And you may be able to see, I'll give you a better shot in a second, but the Crypt balanci in the back, I think has been doing really well actually. I think it's been growing quite a few new leaves back there. It's kind of harder to check on the growth because it is kind of behind everything, but especially now with more light, less floating plants, I think that it will start to grow up more. And there are like a few pieces that are at the surface back there, along with a little bit of the Bacopa, and some of the Ludwigia is starting to get there. But my vision for this aquarium really was to have this kind of wall of stem plants behind. So hopefully with these changes that I've made, it will get there. So let's talk about the fish now. How are the fish doing? Well, the fish are kind of an interesting story. For the most part, they have been doing really well. I did have 2 losses, unfortunately. So we're down to, I think it's 16 Cardinal Tetras and then now 1 honey Gourami. And it was kind of weird. The 2 losses that I had happened on the same day. And it was right after a water change when I added a couple fertilizers with the water change. So besides that UNS plant food min, I was also adding Seachem Flourish. And I think, well, let me take a step back. Because after it happened, I did a lot of research to try to figure out why, because the all of the fish were really healthy and all of the water parameters have been very stable since setting up this aquarium. And I did a little bit of research and I found out, well, from walking around my house a little bit, that we do have copper pipes. And before that water change, I just ran the water straight into the bucket. I didn't let the water run a little bit before taking that water and using it to fill up the aquarium. And I think that I probably got a little bit of a higher copper concentration in the water that I used for the water change. Basically, I learned that you need to let your water run for a little bit to get any copper that's collected in your pipes out of that water before it's more of like a normal concentration of copper in your tap water. And I think between that and mixing 2 fertilizers, the copper concentration in the water that I added with that fertilizer got fairly high. And so I think that Marmalade, the honey gourami, and one of the Cardinal Tetras, I think that they died of copper poisoning. And I can't be completely sure, but that is really the only thing that I can think of. So I really do think that that's what it is. I have no idea what else it could have been. Because they died on the same day, you know, it couldn't really have been old age. It had to be something that got out of whack just a little bit. So that was really sad, honestly. It was a really good lesson to learn, but it's unfortunate that sometimes those lessons you learn in this hobby result in like death of fish. So yeah, now we're down to just Clementine, the male gourami in here. And it is a little sad, you know, they were the kind of pair centerpiece, and I had both of those fish for like a pretty long time, like I think going on 2 years now, which I haven't been doing this for that long. They were fish I got like pretty early into this hobby. So I think that Clementine doesn't really mind, because Clementine now has like twice the amount of territory and no mate to worry about to do mating rituals and that kind of thing. So I think that he is pretty chill. It's mostly sad for those of us that are outside of the aquarium in my house. But luckily, they did have 3 babies, which I actually have in another tank. I'll show you a little bit of B-roll of that. They're in the rainbow riverbed growing up at the moment. So it's nice that the spirit of Marmalade will live on in her offspring. So that's kind of the saving grace of this whole thing. So really unfortunate to lose those couple of fish, but it wasn't anything to do with the aquarium itself. It was due to me, the outside influence. But besides that, all of the fish in here are doing great. I think the Cardinals really enjoy having so many hiding spaces all over the aquarium. It feels very bright, but there's a ton of spaces where they can get away and hide in shadowy areas like down here and back behind the hardscape, inside of all of the stems and that kind of thing. And then, yeah, Clementine has got the place to himself now. So he is totally loving it as far as I can tell. And he is such a cute, vibrant little guy. Still one of my favorite fish. Honey gouramis are just so peaceful and beautiful. And we did actually have one other fish in here that was a complete surprise. I was just sitting in front of the aquarium, maybe filming it, maybe just watching it. And I saw movement down in this corner here on the substrate. And there was just like a full-fledged juvenile Corydoras. And I think that it grew up in here because I didn't see it until maybe a month ago now. So after the first video came out and everything, I just saw one singular Corydoras. And I think that's because when I set up this tank, I had everything from my old house after moving inside of my biggest tank, the Rainbow Riverbed. And I didn't have it scaped or anything. I just had all of the plants, all of my fish just in there to be in a stable environment while I set up other tanks and then eventually went back and scaped that one. So I think since all of these Java ferns were in there and all of the Corydoras were with the Java ferns, I think it's pretty likely that they laid eggs all over the Java ferns. And then I took them out, the Java ferns, scaped this tank, and then one of the eggs hatched, or maybe more of them, but one of the babies survived and then grew up in here. So unfortunately, I could never capture it on camera because it was so skittish. I would come up to the tank to try to get a picture or video of it, and it would just escape. But luckily, when I did the maintenance session a week ago, I was able to move some things around, catch him out, and return him to his family in the Rainbow Riverbed. So luckily that happened. I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to get that Cory out of here. But we did, so that's exciting. And yeah, it was kind of just crazy to be sitting here one day enjoying my aquarium and then just realize that there was a hitchhiking baby fish that was bred by Corys in another tank. And that has happened to me before. You can check out, I have like a playlist of Saga of the Danio Fry where I had some other mystery babies that you can check out if you want. But yeah, it was fun and exciting, and I'm glad that he or she is with her family now. But overall, I'm still really happy with this tank. It definitely needed that maintenance session to clean things up a little bit, get it prepared for the next 100 days. And it's looking a little bit sparse, but I still think that it is looking awesome. And the Java ferns are growing and growing. The stems, I think, are about to have a huge growth spurt. So overall, I'm really happy. And I think it actually looks a little bit better in terms of the hardscape without having the kind of blobs of moss, because now you can kind of see through things a little bit more and you get a little bit more sense of depth in the aquarium. But lesson learned about adhering moss that way. Going forward in all of the tanks that I've been using moss on, I've been wrapping them with thread. So that's kind of the next experiment to see how moss grows that way. I think it's going to grow a lot better, but if it becomes another algae bomb, it might just be something that I need to tweak in a different way. So I have learned a lot of lessons from this aquarium so far, which I'm super thankful for. So that's the 100 days update on the low-tech nature aquarium here. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a like and make sure that you are subscribed. And there are links for all of the equipment that I've used in this build down in the description if you want to look at anything specific. And you can also check out the first video where I go a little bit more in depth on everything, like the build start to finish and all of that. And if you guys have any similar experiences with having copper pipes in your house and using fertilizers, anything to do with copper in the aquarium, please let me know in the comments. I'm trying to, increase my knowledge as much as possible. So the more that you can share with me, the better it is for me. And if you guys have any crazy stories about finding mystery fish in your aquariums or anything like that, please share them down in the comments. I'd love to hear them. I think it's so interesting when that kind of thing happens. Thanks again for watching, guys. And if you want to see another video, check out this one over here where I set up a little tiny tank for a group of blue dream shrimp. I just released it yesterday, so make sure you check that out if you want to see me set up another aquarium. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one.